step prayers. My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. Now, I'd like for you to just take a moment here, and let me just kind of walk you through a little short memory lane journey regarding your own recovery, your experience. You probably came, like most all of us do, came into recovery because, as they say, it was the last house on the block. Didn't have too many options left. Maybe this was the only decent or halfway good option that you had left. It really wasn't something you would choose to do under any less painful circumstances. It was horrible. But you saw people who told about a good outcome. And they spoke of hope. And you began to have this audacity to believe that you could recover too. And you made the decision that you wanted to recover. In fact, you made the decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understood Him to be. And by the way, that saying, God as we understand Him, that's not a theological statement. That's a personal statement. That's a statement of intimacy. And then you went through the exercise of coming to terms with your own life, both your wounds, your hurts, your disappointments, your bad decisions, your good decisions, and you wrote it down. And from that, you develop really a plethora of information that is helpful. And you spoke about it with someone else. And you let them know what you've come to know about yourself. And some of the things you've come to know about yourself revealed aspects of your personality and your character development that were just not good. And things that you really didn't want anymore. In fact, perhaps it was the first time that you consciously came to terms with the fact that you just didn't like yourself, period. And now what we're doing is we're saying, God, with the same attitude that I look to you for hope to heal me, and with the same attitude that I made the decision to give my life to you, I'm going to give to you these parts of my life, no matter whether it's 10% or 90%. But I'm going to give that to you and ask you to heal it and remove from me the things that are troubling to you and to other people. Okay, for my first reader, we have Sam. Where are you, Sam? There you go. And there we go. Read away.
Humility is a realistic understanding of who we are and how we relate with God, other people, and the world around us. It is a deep commitment to interpersonal truth. Humility necessitates that we maintain an ongoing examination of our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions in order for us to keep a healthy and balanced self-awareness. This builds integrity in the way we think and act. Humility is what causes us to see ourselves as sinners that God is working to redeem. Humility helps us to have healthier understanding of how we fit into the world so that we can freely interact with God and other people on all levels. Humility allows us to understand the power of God in more personal and practical ways. Humility is not self-rejection or self-hatred. It never devalues people because of personal struggles.
Would you please share with us your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I've been amazed at the concept of humility. It, in my previous life, was not something desirable. But since coming here to Mariners and walking this recovery journey, it's occurred to me that it is an integral part of getting a deeper relationship with Jesus. And another part of that that's come to me recently is I feel like God took a gamble with us as addicts, with whatever our various drug of choice is, in the sense that we have this option. We can either go really far one way or really far the other way. We have this amazing capability to just far exceed. I guess we can just feel more than a lot of people, it seems like. And so that can either be really good or really bad. We can both probably relate to both ends of that spectrum. So I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but I think as the journey is walked out, we through humility, God can then realign us with His plan, and it's always way better, way deeper, way more complex, and far exceeds anything that at least I could ever imagine on my own prior to walking this journey out.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thanks, Sam. Those good words. As you were talking, I started thinking about what I call a binocular perspective on life. If you know what binoculars are, you have one for each eye, and you put them up there, and you have the little adjustment thing, and you put these up, and you have two lenses that come together, and you adjust them, and it comes into focus in one image. And you can adjust for distance, and you can adjust for clarity, but it's two eyes bringing the focus into one. And that's how you see. A binocular perspective for me, and this has to do with humility for me, is understanding my diagnosis. Now, as you folks know, I'm an alcoholic. I don't drink because I'm an alcoholic. It was interesting is that I couldn't stop drinking until I came to terms with the fact that I was an alcoholic, and that if I ever wanted to have a decent life, I was going to have to stop drinking. So really the question was not whether or not I was an alcoholic. The question was, did I want to have a decent life? I'm also a drug addict. I'm also a porn addict. In fact, pornography was my first drug, looking at my dad's pornography. Now, I understand today that when little boys and little girls look at pornography, it's kind of a setup for them. It teaches their brain to be appreciated, to be intoxicated. And then later on in life, they can start finding other things to intoxicate themselves as well. Now, I say these things freely. In fact, I'm grateful to be an alcoholic. I'm grateful for my addictions because they afforded me a certain experience of self-humiliation that I'm not sure if I could get any other way. And that was a platform and a perspective that I have to have, and then you bring that perspective along with the perspective that God gives me for hope and healing, and I bring those two things together, and there's the perspective of who I am today and for my choices. And understanding my addictions and the humility to own them and realize they're not in the past, they could bite me in the ass today. That is a motivator. Because I don't want to die. But equally, I don't want to die because there's a vision. There's something to be lived for. And understanding that and the humility of that helps me make decisions. Sam, did you have anything else you want to say? I know you're a pretty smart guy. I like when you talk, so I thought you might have something else.
There's this concept of cognitive dissonance.
Yep.
And the way that I see this relating here is many of us can probably, and I hear this in meetings all the time, so I can speak for myself, but probably for a lot of other people, from the very beginning before we started into any avenue that
Right.
became an addiction. Those patterns that were created
Right.
were the result of uncomfortability, I guess is a Christianese term. But basically the idea that we weren't comfortable in our own skin,
Right.
or however you want to word that, but the idea of cognitive dissonance in relationship with the Bible is maybe it's because, God has a special call for us.
Right.
And we didn't understand that, or we didn't interpret it the right way, so we went to great lengths to avoid that discomfort. And it sent us down all kinds of different avenues. Fast forward, we're here now to find out how to leverage that skill set that we were born with that we didn't recognize until, we hit a couple bumps.
Right.
So that's all I wanted to add.
That's great words. Great words. The experience that we've had up to this point in our life is very much the lens that we are likely to see our future. Unless some powerful things help us to see things a little differently. Recovery is all about learning these powerful things. It can change our perspective. I understand why people want to get drunk. Why wouldn't they? People asked me one time, why do you do drugs? And I was thinking, well, why not? I'm miserable otherwise. Give me a reason not to. And in recovery, it's not like whammo and we're all fixed. Boy, if that were the case, we'd all be millionaires because we could just bottle it and sell it. But we learn to face it. I am a great believer that, especially in the shame that is underlying, that is so entrenched in our experience as people who've been addicted. We don't escape it. We learn to face it. And we learn to face it because other people have faced it, and we face it together. This is the power of story. This is the power of community. So when someone else shares about their experience, and I'm sitting here going, oh my goodness, me too. And I look at them and go, no, they're not so bad. And I realize, I'm not so bad. Wow. So there we go. Okay, let's go on to our next reader. And that would be Joe, I believe. Yep. Okay, we need a mic for Joe. It's coming to you. Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name is Joe. I'm an alcoholic.
Me too, Joe.
Now we are asking God with as much humility as possible to resolve the problems that stand in the way of us experiencing all that God has for us. Before, we had spent much of our lives and energy attempting to overcome what we could never overcome in our own power. But today, as we surrender our lives to God and humbly ask Him to remove our shortcomings, we discover a strength that is unlike anything that we have ever encountered before. Only in God and through the help of others will we receive the strength and the endurance to continuously let go of our character defects and our addictions.
And your thoughts?
I was taking a little bit from what your previous comments here tonight were, and I was thinking, what's the need for humility if I've nailed it? In other words, if I haven't drank in 35 years, then I don't drink. Okay, I've got a lot of clarity on that.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so it's not that doesn't require humility. I humble myself every day by acknowledging that, but there are things that I don't nail every day. They're like anger or fear, more subtle defects that aren't raging alcoholic behavior. Right. They could lead to that, but they're I guess they're the more generic defects that all human beings suffer from. Mm-hmm. And anyhow, I react and I go crazy. I rage on a loved one, or I rage on myself.
Yeah, me too.
I underlined here, it said, only in God. I underlined in God, and only through the help of others. Sometimes I'm not really connected as strongly with God as I need to be. And it's the person that I can see next to me that knows who I am and can confront me, or I can go to them in a sense of emotional disturbance or despair and say, help me. And then we have that shared experience of powerlessness over these defects. And like you said, it brings us, the courage to face the shame. The shame of, don't tell me I need to make this amend for the 800th time. Well, maybe in the 801st time, I will have sufficient clarity where my spirit will be modified sufficiently to, maybe not step in that hole anymore. But it's always going to be something. There's always something right behind it to, increase our spiritual power.
Right. Great words. Great words. Thank you, Joe. A couple of thoughts that came to mind as you were sharing is that, in the 12 steps, it only mentions alcohol or addiction in the first step. And all it says is that we are powerless over this thing, the alcohol, the controlling of another person, the food intake, the pornography, whatever it might be. It just says that we're powerless over that. Everything else about the 12 steps is about coming to terms with the faults and the foibles and the weaknesses of human beings. Part of our blessed advantage of being people who recognize our addictions is that we don't have the dubious luxury of complacency. Absolutely. Absolutely. We either grow or we die. That's it. It's not like we just get to a point where we go, hey, I'm 35 years sober. Actually, I'm not. I'm 18. Actually, November 19th, that's 6 days from now, I'll be years sober. So, assuming I don't go out, thank you. Assuming I don't go out and do something really stupid, which at least in regards to drugs or alcohol, I do stupid things on a regular basis. I believe that people who've come to terms and are facing their addictions are the most blessed people in the world. We have every reason to be motivated and to move forward. And we have every reason to learn to do it with the humility that only God can provide. We cannot fake it. Here we go. And my third reader is, our third reader is, one little point here. Let me make this point here. It's on your handout. The humility that we're talking about here makes no judgments about other people and even about ourselves. God doesn't judge us because of our character defects. Now, doesn't mean He won't address them. But the love of God came for us. Jesus died for us, and that what? While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And so, it's not like our job is to quit being sinners. In fact, I think it behooves us to come to terms with the fact that we're better at that than the average Joe. And quit being embarrassed about it. Miss Audrey, where are you? There we go. Can you pass the mic? There, here it comes.
Hi, I'm Audrey. I struggle with codependency and addictive behaviors.
Me too.
We will inevitably find ourselves in situations where we have to choose between trusting God amidst our repeated attempts of trying and failing, and the certain penalty of failing to try, which is in and of itself a failure to trust God. What we choose to do with failure is perhaps the most profound indicator of who we are and who we will become. Failure with effort can be a frustrating setback, The setbacks and disappointments create the sad feelings inside of ourselves that we may never overcome our problems. This is where we will need help from our friends in recovery and from God Himself. We will all have setbacks. We will try and fail sometimes, but let us stay honest and let us stay motivated, because our own fatal failure is giving up. Failure to try is suicide. It is here, in our failures and setbacks, that we learn to keep turning to God time after time, and in so doing, we learn to experience Him to be our source, our strength, and our joy. Humility is a healthy understanding of our limitations and where to go for help.
Great reading. Your thoughts, please.
One of the things that I stuck on was failure to try is suicide. And it's become clear to me in my recovery journey that there's lots of ways to die.
Yeah.
And I've experienced many of them. And failure, the death of hope, or the death of love, or the death of vision. I can just be walking through life and not even experiencing reality. And what has helped me in my journey is these people that I have, my accountability partners and my sponsor and my friends and people who will tell me the truth and, slap me upside the face when I'm getting off track and just say, hey girl, this is not working. Try something different. And so when I practice the rules of the room and, have a reservation on my seat and get a sponsor, work my steps and take direction, then my life changes. And then I'm not dying. Then I'm seeing progress. Then I'm seeing a change in my life, even when there are setbacks and failures. And I just had one recently in my business, and what I realized was that the setback is an opportunity to move forward to a better place. It looks like a failure in the short term, but in the long term, it's taking me to a higher situation. I'm cleaning up the stuff, the dead dogs in the basement, which are not fun to deal with. But the failure or seeming failure is not all bad.
That's a great share, Audrey. Thank you for that. Your comment when you said there's lots of ways to die, the death of hope, the death of vision. Wow, that's a new way to say it that helped me very, very much. As I look forward to this, being 18 years sober, I realize that a lot has changed in my character and in my personality over this 18 years. And in one hand, it almost feels like I have more character defects today than ever. But I'd say that I'm just really more aware of them today than ever. And to say that, it feels like such a dark thing to say. But I'm not afraid to say that now. And I don't think we even need to be afraid of our character defects. I mean, other than being aware of them and being honest about them and living as responsibly as we know how. And when I say responsibly, I don't want it to be confused with fault. Our character defects kind of grew out of our own inadequate needs to take care of ourselves and the strategies. I've been doing a little writing, and I started writing about this tree that grows out of a rock. We've probably all seen pictures. You see them in Colorado where the tree just grows out the middle of a rock. And these trees always look really weird. They're all twisted and gnarled. But doggone it, it's a tree that grew out of a rock. That's 1 in a million. Who cares what it looks like? It's done what all the other trees around it haven't done. And you know what? They may all look really good, but They all look just the same. Which is the one that's extraordinary? It is astounding what happens when we face the gravity of our addictions and our emotional deformities. They become a kindling that burns up what is not needed. And what remains becomes fused into this thing that grows, and it amazes people around it. I can't believe I'm standing right here with you tonight. I never wanted to do something like this. I'm a freaking introvert. You know what? Give me Netflix. I'm happy. When people face the worst about themselves and allow God to work on that according to His plan, there's no guarantee that you will become the person that you want to be. But it ain't about you anymore. One of the things I had to come to terms with is that the life that I had wanted when I was a little bitty boy was taken away when I was a little bitty boy. And I spent the next 32 years to try to create a life out of thin air to prove to myself that I was alive. And the whole time I was just doing everything I could to disconnect and even eliminate my own experience. But here I sit with people, and in this room represents the kind of hope and the inspiration that will lead the way here at Mariners Church. I promise you that. You know, the Apostle Paul, I am fascinated with the Apostle Paul. Really don't have a whole lot in common with him. Before he came to know Christ, he had his act together. I never did. Ever. Still don't. But through Paul's life and in his later writings, he became much more forthcoming about his own sinfulness. In fact, he refers to himself as the greatest sinner of all time, which I find quite comforting, because I always thought that was me. Now, me and a couple of you guys that I know, we probably make the honorable mention list, but we're not the Apostle Paul. And Paul would say things like, you know, he had been imprisoned several times, shipwrecked, stoned, beaten. He had all kinds of physical and circumstantial suffering. And in Colossians, he says, you know what? I count it joy. I am happy to experience this kind of suffering if that helps you to experience more of the love of God. So it was obvious to me that Paul wasn't afraid of a little inconvenience or a little bit of physical suffering. It wasn't an external pain that bothered him. And then in 2 Corinthians, this is my favorite verse. Paul says, I was given the gift of a handicap to keep me in constant touch with my limitations. Any of you ever felt handicapped? Yeah, well, give me a couple of beers and I certainly look handicapped. Satan's angel did his best to get me down. What he in fact did was push me to my knees. No danger then of walking around high and mighty. At first I didn't think of it as a gift, and I begged God to remove it. 3 times I did that. And then he told me, my grace is enough. It's all you need. My strength comes into its own in your weakness. Once I heard that, I was glad to let it happen. I quit focusing on the handicap, the shortcoming, and began appreciating the gift. It was a case of Christ's strength moving in on my weakness. Now I take limitations, character defects, in stride and with good cheer. Wow. And it's amazing. You go to 12-step programs and you see people kind of make fun of themselves in a lighthearted sense. These limitations that cut me down to size, abuse, accidents, opposition, bad breaks, I just let Christ take over, and so the weaker I get, the stronger I become. Now, I must tell you that there is still a part of me that resists coming to terms with how needy and weak and pathetic I can be as I keep my head down looking at my paper. And that's okay. It's all right. We are not at fault for how we got here. But we are able for what we do going forward. I believe that the way we live in a faithful way to humbly ask God to remove our character defects, we're asking Him to do something that we cannot do. But our response-ableness says that we live in accordance with that request. So allow yourself to be aware of your character defects. Take that handout. Use it as an exercise. It's a great tool. Let your reality speak to you. Speak to God, speak to another person, and then make the changes in your life and in your attitude that you can. And you will be happier for it.